Rome had more wealth than any civilization before it, and it still went broke. Centuries later, Spain went broke too, even while Spanish ships were hauling home more silver than the world had ever seen moved in one place. Both empires collapsed rich. That's the part that doesn't add up until you see what was actually happening underneath all that money. 650 years ago, a scholar named Ibn Khaldun watched this exact pattern from the inside. He served in the courts of several dynasties across North Africa, advising rulers whose own empires were already sliding toward the same fate, and he wrote down everything he noticed in a book called the Muqaddimah. What he found works like a mechanism. 4 specific forces that show up in almost the same order every time a wealthy, comfortable society falls apart. Ibn Khaldun watched all 4 wreck the dynasties he served. Rome and Spain lived through all 4 without ever reading a word he wrote. See if you can spot all 4 somewhere closer to home. Ibn Khaldun built his whole theory around one idea. He called it asabiyyah. There's no clean English translation, but the closest thing is group loyalty so strong it barely feels like a choice. The kind you only get when everyone's survival actually depends on everyone else showing up. Picture a small group with no walls around them, no wealth, and nobody coming to save them if things go wrong. The only thing keeping any one person alive out there is the person standing next to them. That kind of pressure changes people. Loyalty stops being a nice idea and turns into the real cost of staying alive. Ibn Khaldun argued that this rough, unpolished bond mattered more than resources and more than cleverness. It was the actual engine behind every rising power in history. It's almost never the people already comfortable at the center of power who carry the strongest version of this bond. It's the outsiders, the frontier tribes, the people the establishment looks down on, and that stays true right up until those same outsiders end up running the place. Hardship sharpens people. It gives them a reason to move as one, long before comfort gets the chance to soften them up. You've probably seen a smaller version of this play out somewhere far from ancient history. A scrappy business outlasting a comfortable giant, a movement that starts on the margins and eventually takes over the mainstream. Same fuel, different century. People with less to lose, bound tightly to each other, tend to beat people who've simply gotten comfortable winning. The very bond that builds an empire is also, slowly, taken apart by the empire's own success. Ibn Khaldun tracked this unraveling across roughly 3 generations, close to 120 years by his own math, and once you hear the pattern laid out, you start noticing it everywhere. The first generation builds, they remember exactly what the struggle cost, so they guard what they've won like it could disappear tomorrow. The second generation inherits the power. They grew up close enough to the hardship that some of the old instincts stuck, so they're softer than their parents, though comfort hasn't fully caught up with them yet. The third generation has only ever known comfort. They've never depended on anyone the way their grandparents did, and without quite noticing it, they start treating stability like a permanent feature of the world instead of something their own family fought hard to build. There's a debate buried in here that's been running for as long as people have been alive to have it. Almost every generation, in almost every culture historians have studied, thinks the generation coming up behind it is softer and less capable of handling hard times. Sometimes that's just older people being older people. But Ibn Khaldun made this exact argument 650 years ago, long before anyone could dismiss it as just another kids these days complaint. So either every generation in recorded history has been wrong about the one after it, or something structurally real keeps getting rediscovered and re-argued, over and over, century after century. Take that one to the comments, because I don't think you'll all agree. There's real research on a version of this too, entirely separate from Ibn Khaldun. family wealth researchers keep finding the same pattern, sometimes summed up as shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. One generation earns a fortune, the next manages it, and the third, having never experienced real scarcity, loses it. This shows up across cultures and industries, and it isn't that the third generation is lazy or careless. Discipline is just brutally hard to inherit as a story instead of living it as your own experience. If you grew up hearing a parent or grandparent talk about rationing, doing without, or rebuilding everything from nothing after the Second World War, you probably already understand this on a gut level. That generation didn't need a lecture on staying alert. Life handed it to them directly. What Ibn Khaldun is really describing is what tends to happen a generation or two after that kind of lesson stops being lived firsthand and turns into just a story told at the dinner table. This is where Ibn Khaldun's theory stops sounding like philosophy and turns into something closer to a financial record. Nothing shows the 3-generation problem more clearly than watching a government run out of money that, on paper, it should never have been able to run out of. Start with Rome. Under Augustus, the denarius, Rome's standard silver coin, was struck at close to 95 to 98% pure silver, and it held there for decades. Then, Nero needed money, both to rebuild Rome after the Great Fire and to fund his own extravagance, and he reduced the silver content. It was a small cut, easy to miss at the time. Later emperors kept doing the same thing, a little more each time, whenever the bills piled up faster than the treasury could honestly cover them. Picture your own country's currency slowly turning from real metal into something closer to painted tin, while you're still expected to treat it as worth exactly what it always was. By the worst years of the 3rd century, that same coin held somewhere around 5% silver, if that. By then, the empire's government was minting coins it knew weren't worth what they claimed to be, simply because it could no longer afford to make honest ones. Now move forward 13 centuries to Spain, a country sitting on more silver than any power in history had ever handled at once, shipped home by the boatload from mines in Peru and Mexico. Spain went broke anyway. Under King Philip II alone, the Spanish crown stopped paying its debts 4 separate times in 1557, 1560, 1575, and 1596. Over the following 3 centuries, Spain defaulted a total of 13 times, more than any other country in recorded history. Ships kept arriving every year loaded with treasure, and the government still couldn't stay solvent, because that money went straight into endless wars and a court groan used to endless luxury. While ordinary productive work back home got treated as beneath a nation that had started measuring its worth in shipments of bullion instead. Ibn Khaldun described almost exactly this mechanism, centuries before either collapse happened. Early in a dynasty, he wrote, modest taxes on a busy, productive population bring in enormous revenue because people still feel like they're building something of their own. As the dynasty ages, rulers raise taxes to cover the luxury and bureaucracy they've grown used to, and total revenue falls because heavier taxes crush the incentive to produce, trade, and take risks in the first place. This part matters no matter what you personally believe about tax policy today. Centuries later, the economist Arthur Laffer drew a curve to illustrate almost this same idea. Past a certain point, raising tax rates further shrinks total revenue instead of growing it, because it kills off the activity you were trying to tax in the first place. Laffer has said openly where the idea came from. He credits Ibn Khaldun, by name, as the source. So the next time you see people arguing online about whether taxes are too high or too low, you're watching an argument a scholar in North Africa had already worked out in prose 700 years before anyone drew it on a napkin. Rome and 16th century Spain can feel far away, so consider a version of the same story that happened inside a single human lifetime. Kodak's own engineers built the world's first digital camera in 1975. Kodak invented the technology that eventually put Kodak out of business. Company leadership saw it as a threat to their film sales rather than an opportunity, and chose to protect what they already had instead of building what came next. By 2012, the same company that invented digital photography had filed for bankruptcy. That's a company your own parents may have bought film from, brought down by the same instinct Ibn Khaldun described 6 centuries earlier. Protect the comfort you already have, even if it costs you everything that comes after it. As a dynasty ages, Ibn Khaldun noticed something happening right alongside the money problem. Government itself gets heavier. More officials, more paperwork, more layers standing between the person in charge and the people actually living under their rule. Ibn Khaldun didn't think that wall just grew there by accident, like weeds. He had a sharper explanation, and it's a little uncomfortable. The same people whose loyalty built a ruler's power are also the people most likely to feel entitled to question him, because they remember standing next to him as something close to equals back when none of this was guaranteed. A ruler who wants to feel safe eventually starts easing those people out. In their place come outsiders, hired soldiers, purchased retainers, career officials, people whose loyalty is bought new rather than earned old. Those new people are safer for the ruler in the short run. They have no old claim on him and no independent power base of their own. But they also carry no memory of what the founding generation actually went through, and no loyalty to anyone beyond whoever is currently signing their pay. In Ibn Khaldun's account, that wall gets built on purpose, one trusted outsider at a time, by a ruler trading the very bond that made him powerful for a staff that can never threaten him, and, eventually, can't be trusted to tell him the truth either. That changes who rises to the top. Early on, the people who advance are genuinely useful and trusted by their own community. Later, the people who advance are simply the ones who've learned how to work the system itself. Ibn Khaldun pointed out that rulers, boxed in by courtiers and officials, tend to lose an accurate sense of what's really happening to their own people, right at the exact moment they need that information most. Rome gave history a near-perfect example of this a few decades after its worst currency troubles. In the year 301, Emperor Diocletian tried to fix the runaway inflation his predecessor's coin-shaving had caused. His fix was the Edict on Maximum Prices, a sweeping set of government price controls covering thousands of goods across the empire. It failed almost immediately. Merchants refused to sell at the prices the government demanded. Black markets took over instead, and the whole edict fell apart within a few years. Even a genuinely well-meaning fix, stacked on top of a problem the government itself created, can end up making things worse. Now ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you watched a company, an institution, or even a family get so comfortable with its own success that it stopped questioning itself right up until the moment everything fell apart? It would be easy to walk away from all of this thinking collapse is basically destiny, like every dynasty is on a countdown clock starting the day it's founded. That's not what Ibn Khaldun argued, and it's not what history shows either. Civilizations fall because comfort disables the exact habits that created the comfort in the first place, and almost nobody notices soon enough to do anything about it. That's a mechanical process. Mechanical processes can be interrupted. Look closely at the societies and institutions that lasted the longest, and a pattern shows up. They built some kind of deliberate memory into their culture, a way of making sure every new generation understood what the earlier one had sacrificed to get there. Sometimes that looked like mandatory military or civic service that every generation had to go through, regardless of how wealthy their family already was, the kind of thing countries like Switzerland and South Korea still build into national life on purpose today. Sometimes it was religious ritual built around fasting, giving, or remembrance. Sometimes it was nothing fancier than a family that insisted on telling its kids exactly how hard the early years really were, instead of letting comfort rewrite the family story over time. And on the financial side, the governments that lasted longest usually treated a stable currency and a broad, lightly taxed, productive population as something worth protecting, even when debasing the coin or borrowing more looked like the easier move in the moment. You can watch a company try to engineer this same instinct on purpose, in real time. Remember Kodak, sitting on the invention that could have saved it and choosing comfort instead? Compare that to Amazon. Jeff Bezos spent years building an internal culture around the idea that the company should always act like it's on its first day, on the theory that the moment an organization starts acting like it has already arrived, decline has begun, long before it ever shows up on a balance sheet. Whether or not you like everything about that company, the instinct underneath it is pure Ibn Khaldun. If nothing forces you to remember the hunger of the early days, you have to manufacture that memory on purpose, in your culture, your rituals, and the stories you keep telling or comfort will erase it for you without asking permission. None of that guarantees survival. But it's the difference between a society that notices the walls getting thin while there's still time to do something about it, and one that only finds out once the roof is already coming down. Go back to the 4 forces from the start of this video, because every one of them has shown up by now. Comfort dissolving the bond that built the whole thing, a memory of real hardship fading out in almost exactly 3 generations. A currency and a tax base bled dry long before anyone officially calls it a crisis, and a wall of bureaucracy rising up between the people in charge and the people they were supposed to serve. Different centuries, different continents, same 4 forces, working together every time. Empires rarely collapse in one dramatic betrayal or a single catastrophic battle. The real damage is the grind, tax increase by tax increase, debased coin by debased coin, layer of bureaucracy by layer of bureaucracy, until the people at the top have completely lost touch with the people at the bottom, and almost nobody left in power remembers what it felt like to have nothing. Ibn Khaldun wasn't writing a warning meant only for sultans and kings 6 centuries ago. He was describing something closer to a recurring feature of human nature, one that doesn't care what century it is or what flag happens to be flying over the treasury. Cohesion builds a civilization, comfort erodes it, and the cycle only breaks when enough people choose, on purpose, to remember what it actually took to build what they inherited. I want you to actually answer this in the comments, not just scroll past it. Somewhere between a founding generation that built something out of nothing and a 3rd generation that's forgotten what that cost, where do you think we are right now? Not in some faraway empire, in your own country, your own industry, maybe your own family, and whatever you're planning to leave behind. I don't think everyone watching this is going to land on the same answer, and that disagreement is kind of the point. If this put a name to something you'd already half noticed, say so below. Send it to someone who'd argue with you about it. And if you want more of these, subscribe. There's more of this coming.